I never really anticipated that Wall Street would be the first ones to force the issue, but I'm grateful that they are because up until now, they've only been focused on quarterly earnings. But now they're putting the pieces together and they're going, quarterly earnings are completely aligned with well being. So you just can't keep grinding and grinding and grinding people and expecting them to get performance. It's not going to happen. Right now, the stock market is, an all-time high, but realistically, it's only like 10 companies. It's all these tech companies chasing AI that are really driving the market higher. So if you're in an industry that's not AI related, the shareholders are going to be coming and they're going to go, what are you doing? How are you elevating employee well-being? So what I'm saying is that companies are going to respond to this because CEOs are going to get the pressure to do it.
Welcome to E3, Engage and Empower with Empathy, a podcast brought to you by the Empathy Collective, a consulting firm that empowers leaders and their teams to navigate change through purpose-driven conversations. We are building a community of like-minded leaders and experts who all share the same passion, taking care of people at work. Whether you are a plant manager trying to humanize the factory floor, a small business owner wanting to build a strong culture that lasts, or a corporate executive striving to prevent burnout in your team, you belong in this community. For more than 25 years, Mark Crowley led nationwide teams to record-breaking success inside of one of America's largest financial services companies, not by relying on traditional command and control tactics, but by tapping into something far more powerful, emotional connection. At a time when most leaders were focused on pressure, oversight, and metrics, Mark did the opposite. He cared. He listened. He invested in people as human beings, and the results were extraordinary. Breakthrough performance, trust, loyalty, and teams that consistently excelled. Curious about why this unconventional approach works so well, Mark spent 2 years investigating the science behind it. What he discovered became the foundation of his groundbreaking book, Lead from the Heart, now taught in 11 universities and embraced by leaders across industries. Long before it was mainstream, Mark helped the world understand that emotions drive up to 95% of human behavior, and that the heart and brain work together to shape motivation, performance, and well-being. His message was clear. People thrive when they feel valued, safe, and supported, and no leadership method outperforms genuine human connection. Now, more than a decade later, in a world shaped by new expectations, hybrid work, and culture change, Mark's message has never been more urgent. And his book, The Power of Employee Well-Being, pushes this evolution even further, revealing new research that shows employee well-being isn't a perk. It's a direct driver of team and organizational success. Through his globally recognized podcast, his writing in Fast Company, and his work as a speaker and consultant, Mark has become a guiding voice for leaders everywhere who want to build workplaces where people truly flourish. This is E3, Engage and Empower with Empathy. Welcome to the show, Mark. It is such a delight to have you here, and I'm sure it feels a little strange for you being on the other side of the microphone.
What
We were
do I
just
do?
talking
What do
about
I
that.
do?
Those of you who aren't aware, Mark has his own podcast, Lead from the Heart, which is the same title of his first book. I also have sitting right next to me. But we will be talking a little bit about both of your books today. So your most recent book, The Power of Employee Well-Being, just finished reading this a few weeks ago. It's a really powerful read, short and sweet, but to the point, and it has a lot of really good nuggets that any business leader, or honestly, even parents, could take away some of these nuggets too. So thank you for being here. Really, really looking forward to digging into employee well-being with you.
Thank you for saying that. The very first person that reached out after the book came out said, I think I'm going to use this more as a parent than as a leader. And I'm like, I didn't anticipate that. So that's it. That's interesting. That's cool.
There's so many parallels between parenting and leadership. So it's really not surprising. So we'll get into that. But before we do, I'm always fascinated by the career journey of all my guests. It's never straightforward. There's always an interesting story. And you talk a lot about that in your first book. And you even started with childhood, which I think really built who you are today. Many of us are who we are today because of our childhood and how we were raised, etc. So, what did your journey look like, Mark, and how did you end up studying this space?
People ask me this question, and it's not like when I was 18 years old, I was working in the rock pile and I realized I really love rocks. I'm going to be a geologist. My mom died when I was 9. And from that moment on, I was raised by my father, and he was actually a very successful guy. However, he was a very dark parent, and he used the next 9 years of my life to psychologically and emotionally abused me, and with the intent of crippling my self-esteem, my self-belief. And he did a very effective job of it. Like even today, there are still things where I'm like, that's not my voice. That's my father's voice yelling at me for something that I didn't do or, didn't measure up. And, that kind of an experience. And it was very, very painful. When I turned 18, he kicked me out of the house. And he was a very wealthy guy. By the time I'm 18, he's almost 70 years old and he's made a good living. And he had all the resources to help me. And he gave me none of it. No tuition support, no rent, no food, no going home for Thanksgiving or Christmas or birthdays. That was it. The relationship was over for all intents and purposes. That's a pretty difficult thing to be just dropped out, and particularly growing up with some degree of affluence, to have nothing all of a sudden was painful. But it was right as I was beginning college. My father told me that I was never going to amount to anything. And so I made it a binary decision in my mind at 18 years old that if I didn't graduate from college, even if it took me 30 years to do it, that I was going to be the abject failure that he told me I was. So I used that as motivation. And the first couple of years, I probably should have been kicked out of school because, I didn't show up. I just wasn't capable of being like a full-time student and doing all the work well. But I think professors saw something in me and I did enough work to get through. But ultimately, I got my sea legs and I figured it out. And I got into this rhythm of get up in the morning and go to school and go to work and then go back to school and study all night and then get up and do it again. And you just keep doing it until all of a sudden they hand you a diploma. When I was graduating, I mean, you think about what I was up against, and I'm at a major university in one of the top public schools in the country. I'm talking to people that had none of the challenges that I had. And they're all going off to these great graduate schools and law schools. And I'm like, I don't have the confidence in myself to do that. I couldn't see what I had triumphed over. I was still hearing this voice of, you're not enough, you're not enough, you're not enough. I started asking people, where are you going? And I realized the common denominator of those people was they didn't have my upbringing. So what was it that they had that I didn't have? And it all came down to care and love and empathy, and thoughtful direction and safety and, somebody coaching you and teaching you all they knew because they loved you and they wanted to see the best in you. They wanted you to achieve whatever your human potential was. That's what I saw in these people. When I started managing people, I made an unconscious decision to give those people everything that I always wanted, almost like an experiment. Like I had this fantasy that if I gave people all of this, will I help them achieve at a far greater level than they would have if I had? So it was almost as though I was putting myself in their place, giving them the love that I didn't get, and seeing whether or not they blossomed. So I'm 43 years old now in this story. And this woman named Cecilia Godino, who worked for me for 20 years, came in my office one day, almost like, those guys, they walk into a saloon and they break open the doors. It was very startling. And she goes, you don't manage people like anybody else around here, right? Like, you manage people very differently. And I'm like, cool your jets here. Like, what's happening here? And I never did ask her what motivated it, but she just said, the people around you, if you look at them, they're managing with fear and intimidation. They don't care about the people the way you do. And they also don't get the results that you do. And I go, give me an example. So she starts giving me examples. And it was at that moment, Rebecca, that I realized this is all a result of that. Like I was doing all this unconsciously and successfully, thank God. Right. And I think the reason that it took me 23 years to figure it out was that if it's not broken, why fix it? And then I was succeeding, getting promotions. And I think I just assumed that everybody did what I did and everybody was approaching it the same way. And I never really looked over in the other lane to see how people were driving. I just kept doing what I was doing because it was working and I was comfortable with that. Fast forward, I left my career. I was a senior vice president for one of the largest financial institutions. I'd just been named leader of the year. We got acquired. I didn't like the culture of the company. I knew I couldn't stay. So I left and decided to write a book. And all I wanted to do is to say, if you do these practices that are really uncommon in business, you will get the results that I get. And those results are everything you want. People happy, people committed, people doing extraordinary work, you succeeding as a leader. And a friend of mine, like 10 months into my process, called me up and he goes, you know, you're going to have to explain why this works, don't you? And I said, well, what do you mean? And he goes, well, people are going to think you need a shitty childhood in order to lead this way. I had never thought of it, never didn't want to do the work, but I was like, you're right. The long and short of it is that I spent another over a year going and looking for research that could validate what I already believed to be true. That by caring about people so deeply, that I was affecting them literally in their hearts. And that created something inside of them that influenced them to flourish and to do extraordinary things. So I found science that I introduced 15 years ago that showed that the heart is actually much more than a pump. Science has just discovered that the heart is more than a blood pump and that it's communicating with the brain and it's sending messages back and forth. And the heart is influencing our choices every single day, 24/7. So I just started writing and started my podcast and I kept learning. And I've learned so much that just continued to validate the original premise.
I absolutely love that story and that journey. And I love that you took something very probably traumatic for you in childhood and turned it into something positive that impacted human lives in a good way. I mean, you probably could have gone in either direction, right? And you took it down the positive path to help other people. I'm curious because I know you talk a lot about this in Lead from the Heart. 15 years ago, the workplace culture topic was very different. The thought of human-centric leadership was almost unheard of. What was the initial reaction you were getting from people as you started vocalizing this philosophy that was clearly inside you the whole time, and then you just started verbalizing it and putting it on paper?
So here I am writing this book that is completely challenging traditional leadership beliefs, like tradition over 100 years. We've always said squeeze people, pay them as little as possible, and squeeze as much out of them as possible. We're just going to exploit the crap out of people, and that's going to drive the greatest profitability updates. And I get this update, and I'm reading it, and I'm like, the numbers of engagement today are the same as they were when I wrote that article. And I'm like, wait a minute. I knew that it hadn't gotten much better, but I was struck by the fact that the numbers were the same exactly they were 10 years ago. For all the talk that we've been doing about employee engagement and how important it is, and all the surveys that we did nothing with it. We specifically didn't hold anyone accountable for making it better. Gallup had 12 questions that drove engagement, but they only did the survey once a year. So you got facilities going, ask them if they like their parking spaces. And hey, the cafeteria wants to know if you like cheese sandwiches on Thursdays. I'm being ridiculous, but the idea is we just put so much information onto these surveys because everybody thought, well, it'd be fun to know, but no one was ever asked to do anything about it. So it's like, well, I guess they don't like cheese sandwiches, but they keep producing cheese sandwiches because nobody was asked to change anything. So metaphorically, what I'm saying is that people would pour their hearts out and say, I work for a guy and he's, manages by fear and intimidation. And he calls me on Sundays and I can't suffer this any longer. And I'm going to quit if you don't fix it. And the guy shows up for work and does nothing about it because no one ever said this is unacceptable. And so I just was like, just this epiphany, like, this is a fraud. This is a joke. We have to stop talking about it. This is like, stop doing it because you're not really sincere. Lo and behold, I see this research and I only saw a snippet of it. And the snippet said that there was a direct relationship between employee well-being and human commitment and productivity, like week to week, how people described how they felt at work had a measurable effect on the key metrics that they used in this experiment. That's all the information that I had. And that's all I needed. I'm like, this is a validation. So I wrote an article in Fast Company and said, this is a major validation, not just that well-being is important, but that how you measure well-being isn't to say, what do you think of your manager? It's to say, how do you feel about the support that you're getting from your manager? Because feelings and emotions, which is the premise of Lead from the Heart, is what drives human behavior. We feel it, we experience it, and then the communication goes to the brain and the brain makes intelligence of it. So if I'm working for somebody that I feel unsafe with, or I feel is threatening to me or is managing with fear, my mind says, do whatever you can do to protect yourself and don't give anything more than you need to. And then somebody reached out to me and said, I saw your article and we're publishing a book on this by the person who did the research that you cited. Would you like to have him on your podcast? And I'm like, hell yeah. I asked him for the research. I got the book and I read it, and it was just like complete validation. It's all about feelings. It's all about asking people like a simple question. The 12 questions that Gallup asks, one of them is, do you have a close friend at work? That's one. It's actually a very big driver of engagement. Yes, if you say yes. Another question is, do you have the right equipment to do your job? So I get my feedback saying I got low engagement. Do I go help them find a friend or do I help them get a computer? It's not very precise. So unless you're giving feedback to managers on all 12 things, but it's too many things it's too many knobs. So what I'm advocating for now, and this is one of the pieces that I've really taken away from well-being, is just ask direct questions. On a scale of 1 to 5, or bright green to bright red, very happy to very angry or unhappy, how do you feel about the support that you receive from your manager? Or on that same scale, how do you feel about the growth opportunities that are being provided to you, including coaching opportunities and opportunities to learn new things that might be of interest to you within your career? Right across the score, you're just getting these scores. Then you just take that information and say, let's deal with this only. And I love the precision of that. But it all boils down to how people feel. So if you can get that feedback, and you can say, we heard your feedback. Thank you. You're not happy about some of this. And some of this we can't fix. But there are a few things that we can do, and we are going to do them. What you've just done is you've made people feel something that is so powerful where they go, they care about me. I matter here. They're listening to me. They're going to make a change. I feel safe. I feel supported. I feel significant. I feel like I'm working for somebody that's my advocate. These are all the things that I was talking about with Lead from the Heart. It's just all boils down to well-being. So they're naturally united. But I think people can get their heads around well-being more than they ever could around Lead from the Heart. So 15 years ago, I was trying to say, there's science here that shows that we're not the rational people we think we are. We're not making all of our decisions up here, even though everybody thinks they are. We tell ourselves we are, but it's all going on under the hood. So if you can get to that, we should be managing people's feelings, not what they think, which is a very big difference because we don't care about how people feel at work. Really, obviously, if we did, we would have done something about engagement all these years. But I'm saying that's the problem. That's where we've made our mistake. If you can align your practices to how people feel, it's going to be this win-win.
Yeah, and I love the simplicity of this because having also been in the corporate environment and completed employee engagement surveys that take 20 minutes to complete, and they're done annually, and so it's just a snapshot in time. So uh,
Yeah.
I'd be interested to understand what you're recommending to make this really part of the day to day as a leader. Because what I found in my experience in corporate is the employee engagement survey comes out. It's a behemoth. It takes a long time to complete. And like you said, a lot of people pour their hearts out. So there are two things. Either people pour their hearts out in the comments section, and then there's no accountability, so they don't really see any outcome. Or there are people who are skeptical about is this really anonymous or whatever, and then they're either just the skeptics and they just fill out random questions. They don't actually authentically complete the questions because they know it's going to take them 20 minutes and it's like, I don't have time for this. So you kind of have employees in two different categories. But then what happens is the results come out, and then all the leaders are super keen on creating their next employee engagement initiative. So that's like the accountability form of it. So it becomes this program rather than something that is permanently infused into leadership behavior. It's like, oh, we're doing employee engagement. So we're going to have this initiative and we're going to have employee engagement champions and they're going to drive it. So then all of a sudden the leaders aren't accountable because you have these champions who are running the projects. And then there's excitement for a few months and then it just fades. And then it's back to the usual stuff and until the next annual survey comes out. What are you seeing as really effective ways that organizations can integrate well-being into the leadership culture so that it really sticks and it's not seen as this separate engagement program that's implemented and then just kind of dies a slow death until the
I
next.
mean, it's interesting because there's a difference between well-being and wellness. And so I know you're asking me about engagement and what would you do differently, but it's interesting because the first thing that came to my mind is that, we've got people saying, I'm burnt out. I'm stressed out. I don't have any boundaries in my day. I'm still getting texts at 9 o'clock at night. And if I don't respond to them, my boss is going to think I'm not committed. And so, I can't put my kid to bed. Like this is what the human experience is, right? I can't keep up with all that I've got. So we go, the solution for that is a free yoga class and a sounds ridiculous, but this
No,
is
but
what
it's
we've
true.
done, right? It's ridiculous. And we're going to give you a meditation app all for free. So instead of solving the problem and looking at the root causes, we're giving people like have a drink at the end of the day. Maybe that'll make you feel better. We're not addressing the real issue. And the real issue is that if we continue to not hold people accountable and just say, this is what we're doing, nothing's ever going to happen. So there has to be a level of accountability for this. But there also has to be an acceptance that the way we are managing people isn't working, which means change. So somebody strong within organizations has to say, we're going to do this differently because we've been doing it wrong, or at least at this point, it's misaligned to what we know about human nature, and hold people accountable to the change and weed out the people who can't make the change. I'm not saying day one you go, hey, Bill, we don't think you're going to make it here because you're a jerk to people. It's like you tell the jerk, we're going to help you. We're going to support you. We're going to tell you what you need to do. That's the power of employee well-being. I make the argument that we need to move on from engagement, but I'm also teaching managers, here are the things that if you do these, you're going to embody the support that people are looking for, but it requires change. So the first thing I would say is don't do this unless you're sincere, because if you tell people we care about your well-being and they see you don't, they're going to go, well, you know what? You're full of it. Aside from massive layoffs, telling people you're going to be supportive of their well-being and not really doing anything about it is probably the greatest way of undermining trust and confidence and loyalty in people that I can think of. So don't get on the train if you don't want to go where it's going. That would be step one. But step two, what I love about the question is that it's really about integrating well-being into how you do your job. There's nothing to say that work isn't hard, that it's not demanding, and you've got big goals and there's stress and there's pressure. We know that. But you can make it better for people. And one way of doing it, which is the way I've advocated for, and I wrote this article in Fast Company saying, not only is it time to stop doing the employee engagement surveys because they've gone nowhere and had no beneficial effect anywhere, but that you should introduce pulse surveys where you ask one question or two questions at a time. And then management gets together and discusses them and then goes back to employees and says, this is what we heard. This is what we're going to do. So I'll give you an example. So let's say there are 10 of us and we all have the same job. We've all got 20 people working for us. So everything is homogenous. The company comes out and sends a survey out and says, on a scale of 1 to 5, how supportive do you feel your manager is with respect to your personal well-being, career growth, and overall satisfaction at your job at XYZ company? So now we've got those 10 results. We can aggregate them instantly. The technology already exists to do this. So now we collectively have a boss, and our boss is seeing my results, your results, and the other 8 people's results. And they're going to compare them. They're going to see, right? So if our boss in this scenario sees this and their boss sees it, it's going to be very transparent that people are going to go, Rebecca is hitting all of her goals, Mark, just like you are. However, people love working for Rebecca and they hate working for you. You're demanding, but you're not supportive. You're expecting everything, but you don't appreciate people. This is what we're hearing. And so now my boss, our boss, and our boss's boss are now have an obligation to call me in and say, we need to put you on a plan. We need to see what you're going to do differently. This has to change. And this is the accountability that never existed with engagement. So if you do that, and I want to keep my job, and I'm seeing that the Rebeccas of the world are out there getting goals met while having people feel very supportive. I now know that it's achievable, and I'm going to have to change my leadership behavior and be more thoughtful, empathetic, and caring about people if I want to keep my job. So one of the things that Gallup has always said is that everybody deserves a great manager. This is the way you get them. You identify how people are getting their results, and you work with the people who are not doing it the way that needs to be done in order to ensure that people feel a great sense of well-being.
Yeah, and I love that, but I'm also thinking, just play devil's advocate for a second. You were talking about burnout earlier. Those people managers, especially in middle management right now, are feeling incredibly crunched at the moment. So imagine that this workplace culture shift happens and HR is implementing this new pulse check and is sitting down with the leader and saying, "Hey, we need to change." Meanwhile, this leader is like completely burnt out, doesn't know how to add some bandwidth to even think about changing the way she leads because she's so stressed out. What would you recommend? I mean, what do we need to do as leaders to prepare ourselves for that shift? Because it takes extra work to to be this way and also to make that shift. It's very rewarding, I agree. But I just get the sense that people leaders are incredibly burned out right now, and this will just be seen as another thing that they have to worry about or have to change their ways, and it'll just create more exhaustion. What is your thought on that?
If the company comes to me only and says you need to improve, that's not good. But if the company comes out and says, we now have the science, we have so much research that shows that this is the direction we need to go into in order to retain people, in order to inspire people, in order to attract people, we need to perform. This is how you get there. So it's a journey. It's not like, hey, read this book and by Monday we expect you to be a perfect well-being supportive leader. That's not going to happen. It has to be an evolution, but it has to be tied to the fact that it's going to get you better outcomes. There's many different things that you could measure, but I think companies are finally realizing that turnover is a joke. Like, why are we letting 35% of our company leave every year? Right. I mean, to me, this was self-evident a long, long time ago, but companies, instead of saying this is a problem, they found an alternative, which was just hire more recruiters and trainers and just keep hiring and training. And then you look at companies that have very low turnover, like the Hilton Hotel. He's like in the 89th percentile in terms of turnover, which means he has none. You go to a Hilton hotel and you ask somebody, hey, if I want to go out for a good hamburger, where do I go? They've been at the property long enough that they know where to go and they can go, you can go over here or I can get you there. And it's like all of a sudden there's this knowledge within the organization that is deep because people are like, I don't know. I just got here, I just started here yesterday. And people don't want to hear that. They want to know you're the expert. And that this is true in all businesses. So it's really just it's a way of saying this is a more effective way of leading people that we didn't know before. and this is the journey that we're going on. I'll give you an example. When I first got out of college, my dad kicked me out of the house and I had to go get a job. And so I ended up getting a job at a men's clothing store. And the guy that I worked for was very accommodating in my schedule. So whatever my quarter schedule, school schedule was, he basically allowed my work schedule to match up to it. So I ended up working there for 5 years. Well, what I learned was how to deal with people, build trust and rapport, how to sell. So I go to this organization, this bank, and they hired me and they go, we think you have like experience that no one else has. And I said, well, what's that? And they said, well, we have always been a business where people came in and told us that they wanted a mortgage or that they wanted a checking account or a CD. But we can't make any money waiting for people to come in and tell us that. We need to be more proactive. We need to teach people that it's not just about serving people well. I used to serve coffee and cookies and people that would bring in $100,000, and that's how they operated until somebody said, this is unsustainable. We're going to have to drive much more revenue out of these bank branches than we're driving today. And that means a cultural change. It's going from cookies and coffee to being much more proactive in sales. That's a big shift. It's a big shift. You're telling people, hey, we need you to go from selling pizzas to selling chicken. It's like, you're going to have to learn chicken. But if you don't, we're not going to be in business. And so some people didn't make it. Some people didn't want to learn chicken. Some people couldn't learn chicken. But most of the people did because the company trained them how to do it, taught them how to do it, trusted that they would be able to get there. I think we all have it in us. It's just a question of understanding that it's important. So we got there. And by the way, we were one of the first banks in the country to do it. And now, like, go into any bank and they're like, hey, I'm looking at your account and you've got $30,000 here. Have you ever thought about an annuity? Like, nobody was having that conversation 30 years ago, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Have you talked to, when was the last time you refinanced your house? Like, why are you asking me these questions? Because I'm going to try to sell you something. We can get there. It's just take the steps, show the initiative. Don't be thinking you're going to transform your organization or any one person overnight. But if you say this is true north and this is where we're going to go, and you've got a senior leader in the company or senior leaders that are all holding their people accountable for it. And you have to be compassionate, but you also have to say, you hold the line and you're giving people data and you're saying, hey, Rebecca, your turnover is at 35% when the company's at 10. Like, people don't want to work for you. We've got to fix that. That's how you get there. I understand the question, but my dad was the president of General Electric Credit Corporation. And when I was growing up, there were no Blackberries. So he would come home and he would get on a train and he would come home and he would have dinner and he would watch TV. And I don't remember him working, but it was never like, he's working 24/7. Technology's allowed it and we have abused it. And this is another component of why well-being is so bad and why people are burning out and so happy, is that there's no boundaries between when you start your day and when you end your day. After I left that bank, I got hired by a guy in a totally different industry. And I don't know if he had a sense that people that worked in banks were lazy or something. In my contract, he said that I have to work 10 hours a day. And I'm already used to working 10 hours a day, so it wasn't a problem for me. But what was the problem for me was that those extra 2 hours in an 8-hour workday that I was working 10 instead of 8, those were his hours, not mine. So in other words, if I'm going to work 10 hours, it's because I'm committed and I'm going to put that discretion into doing great work and working extra hours. When he put it in contract, I had to work 10 and a half hours for anything above 10 hours to be considered as being hardworking, which is ridiculous. So the analogy is that if I say to you that, Rebecca, we're not expecting you to respond to anything, texts or emails between 7 and 7, unless the building's, burning down, unless the company's going out, something horrible's happening. We don't expect you to respond to anything from 7 to 7. You could be even more generous than that, by the way, but let's just say 7 to 7. The reason that companies don't do this is because they know there's a Mark Crowley out there working 10 hours and they don't want to take the fear of telling Mark Crowley that you don't have to work after 7. It's like, okay, well, then I'm just going to watch, all the family reruns and I'm not going to work as hard. That's not the way human nature is. The high performing people are going to continue to work. But it's much more powerful to know that I don't have to work after 7. So if I want to, I'm going to get that satisfaction out of doing it. So my boss doesn't have to come to me and say, Mark, I see you're working at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. You don't have to do that. I know I appreciate it, but it helps me so I can keep up. So now I'm being judged for my effectiveness and my commitment and all that. I can do that. But if I have little kids at home, which I don't anymore, and I want to put my kid to bed and have dinner with them because I've been gone all day long, I want to know that I can stop at 7 and I don't have to go, geez, I got to respond to this. That's a big issue is that people don't feel they're in control and it's spinning our head. And we've got mental health crisis in this country. And you're like, why? What's happening now that didn't happen before? It's the never ending, always expecting, and companies and managers abusing it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the pandemic accelerated it because we got exposed to being switched on at all times as we were all forced to stay at home and try to do our work from home while doing our kids' homework and, I don't know, caring for our elderly parents, logging into Zoom calls, and all of a sudden we just didn't know where that boundary started and ended with work and with home life. So I think that that really flipped a switch in a lot of us, and we haven't really been able to go back to setting those boundaries. So I'd love to understand, given the current climate we're in right now, you're seeing literally every day another big company laying off thousands of employees. You hear articles coming out about job hugging and people fearing for just let me just keep my job right now. That is the environment we're in at the moment. And it seems like there is a lack of loyalty on both sides. So the employee is not very loyal to the employer because they also see that there's not a whole lot of loyalty coming from the other direction. And I'm doing a lot on this podcast to try to lift up the companies who think differently and aren't mass laying off people and are being authentic with their culture and their values because they exist, but what we're seeing in the news is the opposite. How are you responding to this as someone who's studied employee well-being for so long? Where are we going as a society?
Well, it's so interesting. I just took a little time off and I did a lot of hiking. And during my hikes, I was thinking about this question because people come to me and they're like, hey, man, you're talking about well being at a time when people have none of it and you're advocating for it. Like, are you insane? Like, this is where people are looking at me. What world are you on? And and the good news is that I have a lot of experience of, advocating for something that people thought was crazy. So I'm much more comfortable with it. I could just go, be really appreciative of your people. That's a great leadership tip. And, 500 people like it because it's easy. And, that's not where I am and that's not who I am. So I'm advocating for something that I know doesn't really exist. But it hit me again, this little epiphany. I'm writing an article and I've already started on it where I'm going to say that 2026 is the year, despite everything that you're seeing, is going to be the year that companies commit to employee well-being. And the reason is not what I would have expected. There's several reasons, but the number one reason is that Wall Street has finally figured it out that there's enough data that shows that when people are thriving and flourishing, surprise, companies have infinitely greater productivity and infinitely greater returns. CEOs never took engagement seriously because Wall Street never took it seriously. No CEO got, what is your level of engagement? They got, what are your earnings and what are they going to be next quarter? So if you're not hearing engagement is important and a senior manager goes, hey, we really should be focusing on employee engagement, do whatever you want. I don't care, but they don't care. So what's happening now is that you're going to have Wall Street coming to companies and they're going to say, what are you doing to reduce turnover? What are you doing to elevate people's loyalty and commitment? You lay off 15,000 people, which is what Amazon did 2 weeks ago and Google did 6 months ago. It's like, okay, I'm a transactional employee for the rest of my career at this place. Like, if I can find something better, I'm getting the hell out of here. Like, that's what it does. It just turns it on. You turn on me, I'm turning on you.
Yeah.
If you're a CEO of a company, how long is that going to work for you? Like if Google has this reputation of firing people, yes, it's Google. But Amazon, it's like, do I have to go to work for Amazon or could I work for somewhere else that has a better sense of well-being? So I think the pressure is on, but the pressure is coming from Wall Street. So the CEO now is going to be hearing well-being and they're going to have to commit to it. And CEOs get fired all the time. Like they don't last very long. I never really anticipated that Wall Street would be the first ones to force the issue, but I'm grateful that they are because up until now, they've only been focused on quarterly earnings. But now they're putting the pieces together and they're going, quarterly earnings are completely aligned with well being. So you just can't keep grinding and grinding and grinding people and expecting them to get performance. It's not going to happen. Right now, stock market is an all-time high, but realistically, it's only like 10 companies. It's all these tech companies chasing AI that are
Mhm.
really driving the market higher. So if you're in an industry that's not AI related, the shareholders are going to be coming and they're going to go, what are you doing? How are you elevating employee well-being? So what I'm saying is that companies are going to respond to this because CEOs are going to get the pressure to do it. That's just one. The other one is that there's so much evidence that even though people may be job hugging to self-preservation right now because of all the layoffs, you just can't keep laying people off, laying people off, laying people. That's going to have to stop. There's going to be a market where people are going to have a little bit more freedom to find a job and they're going to go where their well-being is taken care of. We know this specifically in Gen Z. People are actually asking for the data when they're going in for jobs and saying, show me what you're doing to support well-being. So what's happened is that a lot of these companies think they have all the power and they can exploit people. So we're going to let people go. We're not going to invest in their training and development, and we're not really going to care about boundaries. People are like making a note of it. And the, when the time comes, there are going to be companies that are going to pay a dear price for this.
Yeah. No, I love that, and I really hope that that is the case for 2026, that Wall Street is waking up to what really makes an impact. What you've known all along from your research.
Well,
Thankfully, you're patient.
yeah,
But yeah, I think we're at a pivotal moment in society, and I hope it takes a turn for the better. And I think your book is published at a very timely moment and when it was needed the most. So I wish you the best of success and really getting the word out there with employee well being. Highly recommend the book. I enjoyed it. Like I said, as a parent and a leader, it was beneficial for me. And I hope all of you feel the same. I appreciate your time today, Mark. Thank you for being with me.
thank you. Lovely conversation. Really appreciate you, Rebecca.
If you enjoyed this podcast and would like to hear more, please subscribe wherever you like to listen to podcasts. And if you would like to learn more about the Empathy Collective, check out our website, theempathycollective.com. Life is too short. Let's take care of each other at work so that together we can make this world a better place.